we're so taught do this, do that in business. But like you said, if you're in a freeze response and you physically feel like you can't, you're gonna feel like you're trying to uphill climb a mountain when you can barely take a step forward. So it's very important to learn these skills so that way your business will thrive and the action that you do take will give you much better results in your business. So
Hello, my loves, and welcome to Create Your Life. My name is Simone Leah, and I am your host. And I am so excited to be here with you guys today because today I had the absolute pleasure of interviewing Valerie Rubin of Heal with Val, who is an anxious attachment specialist working with nervous system regulation and somatic practices. And today we had an amazing conversation because we talked about how somatic practices, nervous system regulation, and parts work can help you as an entrepreneur. So we really dived into these three topics, which honestly could have been a separate episode all on their own. So it was a great conversation today because we really dived into the 4 types of states that you can go into in your nervous system, be it freeze, flight, fight, and fawn, and how you can do nervous system activities and nervous system regulation to try and get your body back to that more neutral state for you. Get it out of these states that are causing your nervous system to be out of whack. We also talked about somatic practices that you can do in relation to this, and also parts work, and another thing actually called brain spotting. And how parts work and brain spotting work is they can really help you to get to the core of what it is that's throwing your nervous system out in the first place. So say you're in a freeze response, doing that work to figure out what the core root of that freeze response is, and removing that root or healing that root or neutralizing that root, whatever you want to call it. I like to say neutralizing. It can help you to get your nervous system back to being regulated, which is obviously what we all want. Because with a nervous system that's not regulated, you may find that running a business can feel like climbing a mountain. You know, when your nervous system is out of whack, your highs are going to be higher, your lows are going to be lower, your stress is going to be insane, you might be unmotivated in a freeze response. Things are just going to throw you out. So having a regulated nervous system is just almost like having a superpower as a business owner. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode today because it was absolutely phenomenal to just talk to Val about this. I work with all of this stuff on myself. I do these activities and practices at home with myself. So I felt so truly blessed to be able to get someone in to talk to you guys about this today. So I hope you guys enjoy this interview. Hello and welcome to Create Your Life. My name is Simone Leah and I am your host, and I'm so excited to be here with you guys today because today, guys, I have the absolute pleasure of interviewing Valerie Rubin from Heal with Val. Now, she's an anxious attachment specialist who works with nervous system regulation and somatic practices. So thank you so much for being here, Val. I am super excited to jump into this.
hey, Simone, thank you so much for having me on. I am so excited to talk more about nervous system regulation practices, somatic exercises, and anxious attachment so that people can feel more regulated, more calm, and just overall happier with their lives and in their business, because businesses can be so challenging, especially as a female entrepreneur. So I'm so excited to dive in.
Oh my goodness, me too. I love all of this sort of stuff. I do a lot of nervous system practices for myself and some somatic practices as well. And it's kind of like a part of my daily life now. And so I'm so happy to be able to talk to someone and share this with you guys in the audience. But let's start with the question of, what does creating a life you love look like to you?
I feel like creating a life that I love, what does that look like to me is also just connecting to my body. When I am connected to my body, when I am connected to my desires, when I'm connected to what I want, I naturally will be living in alignment. I'm going to be living in a space where I'm able to serve, I'm able to inspire, I'm able to help people heal some of the deepest things possible. So living in alignment for me is living a life of alignment and passion and feeling connected to my body. Because when I feel connected to my body, I'm able to connect with my greater mission, my services, and my business. And that's why I'm so excited to dive in on how people can create that for themselves today.
I literally love this. And oh my gosh, so we're going to be talking about nervous system regulation. We're also going to be talking about parts work as well, which for everybody at home, sometimes when you want to do something, you want to be the entrepreneur and you want to launch this, and there's such a big part of you that wants to launch it, there might actually be another part of you that's stopping you from launching it because it doesn't feel safe. So we are going to jump into that as well. But let's start with nervous system regulation and somatic practices, because sometimes when I was first hearing about nervous regulation and somatic practices, I was picturing you have to dance around your living room and like you have to be like all woo woo, and I'm woo woo, so like I was like, oh, what is this thing? So are you able to just give us a little bit of an understanding of what nervous system regulation is, and also like somatic practices and stuff like that if you want to, or we can just start with nervous system regulation, but I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, so why don't we start with nervous system regulation? You don't need to be woo-woo or spiritual to understand your nervous system. We all have a nervous system. So we have four different states of our nervous system. When we are stressed, when our body is perceiving a threat, whether it's real or imagined, it goes into these four states. Especially when you are running a business, this will definitely, like, stress will come up and you will go into maybe one of these four states or a mixture. So, to start with, anxiety, which is also known as the flight response. This could look like anxiety, OCD like symptoms. The fight response is number two. This is anger. So, we're angry, we feel frustrated, you know, all of these things. The third is the freeze or shutdown response. This could look like depression, not having enough energy, lacking motivation, feeling like nothing's ever going to get better in my business. It's always going to be this way. And then the fourth one is people pleasing and codependency, also known as the fawn response. So this could look like only making content if you're a social media content creator for your business, for example, only making content that you feel your audience wants. And that's important as a business owner to listen to what your audience wants. But if you're never checking in with you, if you're only doing what they want and you're people pleasing, even if you're a coach, if you're not sharing what they need to hear because you're afraid to hurt their feelings, you're not setting boundaries in your business. All of that is an indicator that you are in that fawn response in your business. So those are the four different states of the nervous system. And so nervous system regulation practices, they're going to help you support your body in feeling safe so you can come out of these states and go into a more regulated state. People call it the parasympathetic nervous system state. That ultimately means that you will feel capable, you'll feel gratitude, you'll feel like I can handle this. Even if these challenges are coming my way, I can handle this. That's what it's going to look like after you utilize these nervous system practices.
I absolutely love all that. And I think that, like, it's just so interesting because so many people will just be like, do this or do that. And if you're in a
Mhm.
freeze response, maybe you physically can't do that. Or if you're in
Mhm.
like an anger response, you're not going to be able to, everyone's just like, calm down, calm down. And so I think it's so
Mhm.
interesting to know that there's those four different, um, I don't know what you would call them, four
Nervous
different
system states.
nervous system states that will actually identify how you're supposed to move forward from each of those different states. Because obviously, if you're in
Mhm.
one of those states and you do the activities or whatever from the other state, it's not necessarily going to actually do anything for you, and you're just going to get even more frustrated or even more depressed, or whichever state you're in, it's just going to get exacerbated because now you're trying to do it and it's not working. So
Mhm.
I love
Mhm.
all of this. So, for example, if someone was in a freeze response, can you go into a little bit more detail of, say, what that would look like and how they could potentially move through that in daily life?
Absolutely. And just to add on to your point, like we're so taught do this, do that in business. But like you said, if you're in a freeze response and you physically feel like you can't, you're gonna feel like you're trying to uphill climb a mountain when you can barely take a step forward. So it's very important to learn these skills so that way your business will thrive and the action that you do take will give you much better results in your business. So, what freeze would look like is you have very depressed like states. You might feel like I can't move, like feel like, oh, I'm really hungry, but I don't feel like getting off the couch to make myself food. This could look like you're sitting after the shower, you're sitting in your towel for an hour, 30 minutes later, doom scrolling. You're also just feeling so low energy, no motivation, the last thing you want to do is put in action because you feel and think nothing's going to get better. It's hopeless. I feel like a part of me is going to die. All of these things are what is running through your head if you're in the freeze response. And so how to move through that is through nervous system regulation practices. What I find is people give the wrong tools for the wrong state. So I hear people saying, when you're depressed, just meditate. Sit down and meditate. That's the last thing you want to do. Think about it. Our nervous system has adapted the same way as an animal. We're mammals, ultimately. When you hit a deer, it might look frozen. It might look like a deer in headlights, is what they call it. They're literally frozen. They're playing dead. Us humans have that same capacity and capability, and we do the same thing. So if you tell a deer to just sit down and meditate, that's not going to be helpful when you're in that state because you feel collapsed, you feel you have no energy. So what we want to do in that freeze response is get more energy. So if we're meditating, we're going to get even less energy because meditation is supposed to ground you and relax you. And so what I recommend for the freeze response, some simple tools to help you out of it, is even just rubbing your palms, noticing what's the temperature like on my skin? What is the texture of my hands? And then also orienting to the space that you're in. What are 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can taste, 1 thing you can smell? This is going to help your body to orient to the space that you're in and cue to your body there are no physical dangers present. It is okay. And then one last one, so I'm not like rambling. One last one that's going to be very, very impactful as you're maybe coming a little bit of out of that extreme shutdown response where you feel like you can't move. Now, doing something called hip circles. That's a somatic and nervous system regulation practice. So you're going to inhale, you're going to move in a circle. So you're going to inhale going forward, and then exhale, you're going to round out your back. And then you're going to do that even starting for a minute. Even a minute. This is going to help increase energy, help you move some of that stuck energy because you feel so freaking stuck when you're in freeze. That's what I hear a lot from female entrepreneurs and coaches that work with me as well. I feel so stuck. I feel disconnected. And so when you can do those things, that's going to be so imperative for the nervous system to get out of freeze. And then if you notice shame and those negative thoughts, those negative stories about yourself or your business that it won't get better, it's always going to feel this way, it's always going to be this way, I'm hopeless. When you notice that, notice, oh, this is a cue that my nervous system is in a freeze response. Trying to resist or fight the thoughts is going to be completely unhelpful. So when you drop into the body and do these nervous system practices, after you do them, you will naturally begin to shift into a sympathetic nervous system state. What that means is you're going to go into that flight response because we have this polyvagal theory. We have this ladder. This is known as the polyvagal theory. At the bottom is the freeze response. In the middle, as you move up the freeze response, as you're healing it, you're going to feel in a sympathetic activation, meaning you're going to go into your fight or flight state. This could cause you to feel really anxious, really angry. That's a great sign that you're moving out of freeze. Then, as you process that and work through that sympathetic state of fight or flight, and we'll talk about those tools in a moment, then you will naturally go into, so to speak, ventral vagal or your parasympathetic nervous system state. This is what we're all looking for, looking to feel peace, looking to feel like we can handle the challenges coming our way. You're going to have thoughts of gratitude, like everything's working out for me. That's what we're doing. We're trying to move up the ladder. So that's what the freeze response would look like and how to move through it.
I love that. Thank you. And I really love the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise that includes all the senses. I think that's super cool. Um, so I want to also ask, and we will come back to the other ones in a minute, but if I'm in a freeze response and I'm already feeling like stuff is hard, how hard is this journey going to be? Do you know what I mean? So, can we talk
Mhm.
about how, in terms of like, if you're already struggling to climb that mountain, is this going to take months to reset your nervous system? Or do I just do this once a day? If I'm an entrepreneur and I'm working for myself and I need money, am I supposed to be doing a somatic practice every time I notice that I've gone into freeze? So it could be like once an hour for the first 3 weeks. I'm doing something every hour. You know what I mean? Like if you're already like, okay, I wake up in the morning and I'm struggling to get going, so I'll do an exercise. And then an hour later, you've just had your coffee and you're like, oh, I've been scrolling for an hour while I drink my coffee. I better do an exercise. You know, how does this actually look in practice for someone who's living it?
Yes. So it all depends on your nervous system and like the trauma that you've experienced because, I might be able to do a nervous system practice once every 3 days and feel great. But someone else who's experienced extensive chronic trauma, chronic stress, maybe you've been in abusive or toxic relationships or you had childhood trauma, you might have to do these practices more, even doing them, once every few hours to check in with your body. But when we're dysregulated, we're so dissociated, disconnected. So, what I like to do is first just notice what state that you're in. Say you're noticing when you wake up, you're exhausted, you don't want to get out of bed. Okay, what's one thing that I can do? Maybe I can look around the room and do that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique, rub my hands to give me some energy, you know, just really help my body to feel safe in the here and now. So that way, maybe it's a little bit easier to get out of bed. And then, okay, now I'm able to make my coffee and start my day. How can I work through here? So, I ultimately, if you're, my answer is it depends. It depends, and that's why it's important to work with someone who understands the nervous system, like myself or someone else who's trauma informed, because it's not a one size fits all. Especially business owners, you're very, very busy. A lot of my clients are also entrepreneurs, and we'll do like you can completely heal your nervous system and reset your nervous system in even 6 minutes a day starting out. So this is what I'm talking about. It's all depends on you, your trauma history, what you're trying to achieve, because if we're going into parts work, if we have really big goals, right? If we feel I want to reach 6 figures, but we have an inner child part of us that isn't wanting to take responsibility. You feel like you're not capable. You don't feel smart. You have a lot of limiting beliefs or traumas that say, if I'm successful or if I make money, that means I'm bad, I'm greedy, I'm mean. People are going to leave me if I make more money than them. All of these stories will come up as you reach new levels. So, working with what is the story and trauma that I'm working with here? And that's what I help you identify because that's what's actually causing your nervous system to feel and be dysregulated.
I love this. I literally love this. Okay, great. I'm so glad we're going into this. I don't know, guys in the audience, if you've heard of parts work. Is there like a one sentence kind of that you can just say to kind of simplify it for the people at home that may not know about it?
Yes. So parts work is ultimately, I'll just explain it in a grander sense. So we have our younger self, our inner child, so to speak, who's experienced trauma. This younger part of you doesn't feel good enough, unworthy, is sad, lonely. We have that. Then we have something called managers, right? This could look like perfectionism, people pleasing, anxiety. Those are protector parts that are helping us to step away from our inner child's pain. And then we have something called firefighters. These are things that try to put out the pain as quick as possible. This could look like alcohol, like an addiction. This could look like panic attacks, suicidal ideation. This could look like, addiction of any sorts, workaholism. It's trying to get rid of the pain as much and quick as possible because it feels too big to sit with. So parts work helps us to integrate and care for these protector parts, see what is the purpose of these protector parts, and it's usually to protect that inner child. And then that's how inner child work and parts work go hand in hand, because as we're doing parts work, we're seeing what is the story? What is this part doing for you? Procrastination, that's huge for entrepreneurs. What is this procrastination doing for you to protect your inner child? It's protecting me from feeling like a failure because my mom would always reprimand me when I would make mistakes or spill water, etc. So then of course, as you're going to launch a new business and you want to reach six figures, of course your body's going to sign off and say, absolutely not, we're going to procrastinate as much as possible so that I can protect you from feeling those feelings that you felt once as a younger version of you as a child. So with these protector parts, we help to understand the story, the role, function, purpose, and intention of it. So that way we can get you moving forward in your business and help free up all of this energy that's been used to protect you.
Yeah. No, I literally love all of this. I literally love parts work. So if we apply that back to the freeze response, potentially what we're getting at is, okay, someone comes to you and they're like, all right, and you're like, all right, they've got a freeze response. So in theory, you would use the freeze response to unlock what's actually going on so that that freeze response shifts. Yes?
Yes, absolutely. So I would say nervous system regulation first, but what's triggering the freeze? Is it a thought? Is it a belief system? Is it a protector part that's overrunning your life? Right? So it's first identifying what is that. So this could look like procrastination. Yeah, procrastination, like that would be a way that we would do parts work. But also with freeze, it's identifying what's the story that I'm telling myself about this situation. What is it triggering within me that my launch flopped? If my launch didn't do well, what story am I making that believe? What am I making that mean about myself? And what is that reminding me of? So that's where it goes back into parts work. And yeah, freeze response can also be a protector part that that I would work on. But yeah, I also utilize something called brain spotting. That's a form of somatic therapy. We can get into that later, but that's ultimately how parts work can really, really help you. And that way, these triggers won't stop you from living your life anymore. They won't be running your business anymore because you don't need them anymore.
Yeah. No, I love this. And since you've brought it up, can you kind of explain to people as well what somatic practices are? Because we're covering so many things and it's like, okay, well, what is a somatic practice? How does that fit into
Mhm.
everything?
So somatic practices and nervous system regulation go hand in hand. So we have our subconscious mind, which governs 95% of the actions, behaviors, triggers, and traumas in our life. And then we have our conscious mind, which only runs 5%. So our conscious mind is reading books, journaling, listening to podcasts, all of these things. They're helping, and this is also used in talk therapy. It's accessing that 5%. but our subconscious mind governs 95%. So somatic practices, hypnotherapy, will help to unlock that subconscious mind. So somatic practices, we can't just think our way out of it. We can't just tell ourselves a different story. It keeps coming back up. So when we can rewire our subconscious mind, when we can help our body to feel safe, even amidst these challenges, that's when everything starts to fall into place. Somatic practices, we can't think our way out of a response. Our survival brain, it doesn't work that way. We have to get into the body. Anytime you tell someone to calm down, you know they're going to be like, fuck you. I don't like you. Shut up. Like, that's so unhelpful. Like, when you're having a panic attack or you're anxious, you're going to feel your heart's racing. You're going to feel worst case scenario thoughts. You're going to be sweating. So, when we can actually calm our body down and feel relief from our body, that's when the overthinking, the rumination, the anxious thoughts completely stop because we're finding that relief in our body
Yep. I
with
literally
somatic
love.
practices.
Yes, I love this. Thank you. I thank you for like talking to us on such a broad, deep topic today because I know we can give so much more time to all of these things. Let's go back to freeze. Sorry, only because we're on a little path here. So obviously we've got some nervous system regulation stuff to help us get us back into our body. Would you call those nervous system practices that we discussed earlier, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, would you call those the somatic practices? Or would you give someone who's in freeze, yes, you'd go through and you'd do those practices, then you'd also do the inner child work and like the parts work. What would be the sort of somatic practices that you would give to someone who was in a freeze state? And how would that work?
Yes. So how would that work is, yeah, the somatic practice. So to answer your question, yes, I would give nervous system regulation practices and somatic practices. So I guess like somatic practices are in a way, they are healing your nervous system. They're regulating your nervous system. So some practices I would give if you're in the freeze response is those hip circles I was mentioning. Another one is if you're someone who dissociates, um, and you come out of your body. So I don't know if this is a video podcast. Is this a video podcast, Simone?
Yes, yep.
Fabulous. So if I'll also share what this looks like via audio. So you just cross your arms. So one hand is on your, the opposite hand's on your one arm, the opposite hand's on the other one, and you tap back and forth. That's bilateral stimulation. This is going to help you kind of unthaw the freeze response and help you to connect more back into your body because you're tapping. It's kind of harder to dissociate when you're tapping and bringing that physical movement. And then also another thing with tapping. So you could do body tapping if you're in freeze. So this could look like you're sitting crisscross applesauce and you're starting with fists just tapping along your arm, doing it on your chest, on your stomach, on your legs, even your back and your lats. Doing that is going to help bring you much more energy back into your nervous system. It's going to help you de-thaw from that freeze response, help you to move up the ladder, as we spoke earlier.
I love this. How long, just so people know, how long would they want to do these sort of things for? A couple of minutes is enough?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like that's a oh, I can't speak. That's a good question. So I would even start with a minute. Start with a minute, and then if you still feel a bit frozen, keep doing the exercise. But usually you don't need to do it more than a few minutes. As what, and fast breathing, like I mentioned earlier, aka the breath of fire. There's so many YouTube videos explaining how to do it, but it's ultimately giving you more energy versus a lot of people just say, take deep breaths. When you're depressed, meditation and taking those deep breaths are going to put you further into that dysregulated state because it's not meeting your nervous system where it's at. It needs more energy, not less energy.
Guys, I will just put in here because I think it's so important. This is why it's really helpful to actually work with someone, because if I was just going onto YouTube and I've heard that the thing is fire breath and I want to, and I'm like, I'm going to do this next big thing because I keep hearing about fire breath. Everyone keeps talking about fire breath. Or, for example, a big thing that people talk about is ice baths. Now,
Oh, yeah.
I'm very big on Chinese medicine and I know a lot to do with Chinese medicine and that sort of thing. And I know for me personally, ice baths are one of the worst things that I can do for me as a human. And so if you're someone who is just jumping onto something because it's a fad, really listen when you do it that first time as to whether or not it's actually for you, because you may find that just because it works for somebody else, they're a different person, they've got a different body, they've got all different insides, they've got different energy, they've got different filters, which is all your beliefs, thoughts, feelings, past experiences, memories, that sort of stuff. And so if you are just going to go the do it by yourself route, be really conscious of how you feel after you try this stuff. You'll know, all right, this isn't for me. I just went into an ice bath and now I haven't moved for 3 hours and I'm frozen. You'll know that that's not good for you. That's what happens to me. An ice bath it puts me into a freeze state. So what I'm getting at here, guys, is either pay a lot of attention to how you're actually responding to the stuff you're trying, or go and see someone like Val who can actually say, all right, well, currently you're on a freeze response. These activities are good for you and these activities are bad for you. And it's very much about, even like, again, with Chinese medicine as an example, there's 5 elements in Chinese medicine and it's all about creating balance. And if you don't know what you need at which time, you are going to throw yourself out of that harmonious state faster and deregulate yourself more. So just as a little caveat there, guys, just be very conscious that there are 4 different bodily responses with your nervous system, and either go and see someone who can tell you what's going to work, or really pay attention to what is working, because it's you don't want to find yourself going, I need to do the ice baths, and 4 months later you're in a worse state than you started.
Yes, Simone, I am so glad that you brought this up. I was literally just talking about ice baths and how they may not be helpful for people with trauma literally yesterday. So I want to come back to that. But yes, exactly what Simone said. Making sure that you're listening to your body. What are you noticing shifting after you're doing each of these states? That is extremely important and super duper foundational to your healing process. So with ice baths, at least for women, if you are of childbearing age or you have a menstrual cycle, on your, like, according to Chinese medicine, when you are on your period, your temperature drops. So ice baths are like not going to be helpful for you the week of your period. And if you're already dealing with chronic stress, or you've had a lot of childhood trauma or trauma in general, or you're actively in trauma, what ice baths do is they ultimately wake up your nervous system. They activate you. They put you into that sympathetic nervous system. Of course, like, your body's going to go into a shock when you're put in freezing cold water. So it's going to stress you out if you can't handle that acute stress and your body isn't used to going back into homeostasis, back into regulation. It's going to feel harder to come out of it and you're going to feel worse. A lot of my clients say, I've tried cold exposure, I've tried cold baths, and I don't like it. And that's totally normal. It makes complete sense. And if you are that gung ho of trying a cold shower, if you're in a freeze state, I feel like that's not a bad state to do it. If you're in an anxious state, oh, in my experience, that has made me more anxious when I do an ice cold bath in an anxious state. But when you're in that freeze response, it can wake up your nervous system a little bit more, because it's putting you into that sympathetic. So it helps to bring you up the ladder. But with that, like, be mindful. Even doing, like, starting with 15 seconds warm shower, maybe 15 seconds a little bit colder or cold, and then switching back and forth. But if that's also too much for you, there are so many other tools, especially ones that I mentioned today, that you can utilize. Like, you don't need to force yourself to do anything. And that's why, like Simone said, it's very important to work with someone trauma informed who understands the nervous system inside and out, like I do, because we make a customized plan to help you get out of each of these states and to go back into regulation after chronic stress, after trauma.
Yeah, I literally love all of that. I totally 100% agree. And yeah, I tend to let people go when they mention the ice baths. I'm like, you'll figure out if it's for you or not. Because I'm exactly the
Mhm.
same. I'm like, there's never been a point in my life where I'm like, I know that that's good for me. Because I know that for me personally, it's not.
Mhm.
So, and yeah,
Right.
yeah.
That's your nervous system, right? Like, and that's good awareness, noting if that feels good for you. If it doesn't, don't do it.
And I don't even, for me, I don't even think it's related to any past traumas. It's just one of those things
Right.
from when I was little where I'm just like, I just don't do well in cold water. Like,
Right. Like, you just don't like it, and that's okay, like, that is so okay.
yeah, it's like for me, doing something like that, I'll go up, like, yeah, for sure,
Mm,
like I'll go up, but the crash is hours, like, my whole body will
mm.
go into a freeze for a couple of hours, and that's
Oh.
one of the ways something isn't good for you, and that can literally just relate to things like your hormone levels or the way that your body is designed, or your actual like elements in Chinese medicine that you are naturally. There's going to be things that are the opposite of that. So yeah, just guys, it doesn't always have to be the same as everyone else. Just make it up and do your own thing, figure out what works for you. I think is super important. But
Mhm.
let's go into a couple. I don't want to take up too much time and all the things. But what about if someone was in let's say, a flight response? What sort of things would they be doing in terms of nervous system regulation? What would maybe some of the parts work come up for that? And then what would be some somatic practices for those guys?
Yes. So, how to really work with the flight response when you're really anxious. Say your partner hasn't texted you back in 5 hours or a day, and you're really freaking anxious. It's triggering your abandonment wound. Or in a business context, if your business partner hasn't answered you back on an important deadline, you're feeling that freaking anxiety. You're like, when is this bitch going to get back to me? It's like you're feeling that flight response, or you're lower in sales this month, you're going to feel that flight response. So, some somatic practices and nervous system regulation practices that help you. Let's just say if you're at a anxiety level of 7 to 10 on anxiety, maybe you're close to having a panic attack, you're really freaking anxious, and nothing you're doing is not, you can't talk yourself off the ladder, so to speak. So if you're at a 7 to 10 level on anxiety, start with shaking it the fuck out, shaking out the anxiety, shaking out that excess adrenaline, literally shaking your body. Animals are the same way. When they feel anxious, when they're scared, like, my best friend is moving across Canada and he's moving with his cat, and his cat was freaking shaking and freaking the fuck out being in the car. So it was shaking because it's releasing the excess adrenaline. But with humans, why we feel so stuck is we learn from conditioning that, oh, showing emotions are weak. I shouldn't feel that way. Why am I feeling this way? So instead of actually supporting our body and listening to our body, we say these stories that keep us stuck in that state. Isn't that fun? I'm being sarcastic there. But starting with shaking it out, dancing, getting in your body. So those would be the top two when you're at that high level. And then if you're at like a six, let's say 3 to 6 level of anxiety, it's still somewhat medium level high, but you're not going to have a panic attack. I would say what you wanna start with, what some practices that I really love is called the EFT tapping, which stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. I have a specific EFT meditation that I've made for anxiety, and then I also just created a new one on the fear of abandonment. When that abandonment anxiety is coming in with those EFT, that's going to help move this stuck energy, right? We have so much of this anxiety, so much of this energy, like, sitting down and meditating might not be your first go-to. So when you're tapping on it, you're tapping on these points, it's helping you, like, release a lot of that energy. And once that energy is released, or maybe you don't love EFT tapping, something I have, and it's in my bio, and we'll put that in the show notes as well, completely free, is a processing your emotions meditation. It's you're sitting down, but there's also breath work, there's self-soothing touch in there. You're actually reducing your anxiety by bringing awareness to what sensations am I noticing in my body? What emotions am I noticing in my body? Allowing it to be there, and then processing it with breath work and self-soothing touch to help actually regulate those cortisol levels, reduce that stress, because why we get so stuck in anxiety is because we are stuck with the story of it. We're identified with the story that XYZ won't get better, all of these things. And then we're stuck with the story, but the emotions are still there. When you can process those emotions, emotions are energy in motion. So when you process these emotions, you're tapping it out, you're shaking it out, you're dancing it out, you're processing it, it's going to greatly reduce.
I love all of that. And so thank you. And we talk about EFT a lot. I'm a very huge fan.
Yes, love EFT tapping.
Yeah, I have lots of EFT videos. I think yeah, I just use it so much. What I wanted to kind of ask was, what if is it possible to be two of these at the same time? Like, what if you're like in a freeze response, generally speaking, right? So your life is in like, I'm unmotivated, blah, 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 blah. But then you go to actually start being in emotion and then you get anxiety, So like, how would, like, is it possible that you can have to move through and do two lots of things? Like, maybe you have to do the freeze stuff sometimes, and then maybe you have to do obviously the anxious stuff sometimes.
Yes, a lot of people will flip-flop back. So the a shutdown response is that complete collapse. You're feeling like you wanna die, you're feeling like nothing will ever get better, completely hopeless, completely depressed, versus a freeze response. The freeze response, it's gonna look like feeling very unmotivated, low energy, maybe a little bit of those negative thoughts, but you're also gonna feel a sense of dread and overwhelm. I need to do all these things, but I can't. That's what the freeze response looks like. So absolutely, they can definitely coincide and happen at the same time. For freeze, what I mentioned earlier, if you're noticing those symptoms, definitely start with the freeze response tools that we mentioned, and then go into those flight response tools that I mentioned just now.
Can there be crossovers from, say, flight to freeze as well, or people pleasing to anxious? Like, is the
Mhm.
crossovers everywhere?
There definitely is and can be crossovers. So what tends to happen is, if you're in a flight response, if you're anxious for so long, our bodies can only be in survival mode for so long. Our bodies have been adapted to handle and be able to handle acute stressors, not long-term stressors. So especially if you run a business, it can be very challenging because you can be anxious for so long, but your body can't take that. So it puts you into freeze to protect you, or into shutdown. So that's how they can correlate. And then what I find with fawn and people pleasing, because not everyone who has OCD like symptoms or anxiety or is in flight, not everyone goes into fawning. If you have had complex trauma, if you've had a parent who's unpredictable and alcoholic or narcissistic, you learned that the fight, anger, and fighting them wasn't going to help you. You learned that flight, running away, wasn't going to help you. And you learned that freezing wasn't going to help you. So you learned to become helpful and adaptable and people please in order to survive and maintain that connection with your caregiver. So that's where fawning can really cross over with these, but you definitely can go into the flight. Also, I find that fawn it's a mix of shutdown. It's trying to protect you from feeling that anxiety, that depression. It's helping that inner child who's stuck with those not good enough wounds to help find a sense of safety.
Yeah. Can you go through all four at the same time, or is there generally a core one at the bottom that's the main thing that needs to be focused on?
So I would say it depends on the person, but usually, other than the freeze response, you usually go through one at a time, but they can coincide. Like you can notice, oh, I'm in freeze and I'm noticing I'm wanting to people please. So they can happen at the same time. They can cross over, or you can flip flop out of them,
Yep. Oh, I
like
love
I
that. It's
mentioned.
so interesting. Um, and so if someone was working on this sort of stuff, you would literally do all three things together, not together like at the same time, but you would do nervous system regulation stuff, you would do parts work stuff, and you would do the somatic practices so that you're really moving through everything. You're moving through the physical responses with the nervous system regulation, the somatic practices, but you're also doing the deeper work with the parts work. Yes?
Yes, absolutely. And if we're dealing with depression, grief, complex trauma, I also utilize brain spotting, right? Because we could do the nervous system tools every single day. But if we're constantly like feeling in freeze, why is that actually there? Is it a belief system? Is it a trauma? We go back to the root of that in brain spotting to see what is actually happening. Brain spotting helps to unlock where your trauma memories are stored so that you can release them. And so nervous system regulation and really getting into those somatic practices are helpful in the sessions as well. Because if you're noticing you're coming out of a freeze response, you're coming out of grief, you might feel angry. Like a client of mine, for example, she like was single for a few years, but she was with a narcissist, and a part of her wanted to leave the relationship, but she couldn't and didn't. And literally her body wanted her to open up the door and leave the room. And she did that about 50 times. And that's how many times that she literally wanted to leave, but couldn't. And so the body is so directly correlated with all of this. And so somatic practices, nervous system regulation is can also be used during those parts work sessions and brain spotting sessions. It's the most powerful thing ever. It's so powerful because that way, when you're getting to the root of why does this freeze keep coming up for me, what traumas are connected to this, that's when you won't go into it as much. But
Yeah.
it's important to do regulation exercises daily so that it's kind of like preventative medicine, right? Like if you stop going to the gym, you're not going to keep on the muscle. You're not going to continue looking and feeling your best. So it's the same with nervous system regulation practices to keep you regulated. You want to do those daily.
Wow, I love all this, and I really want to keep talking to you all day. I am aware of time though, so we won't. But what is this brain spotting thing you keep mentioning, just for anybody at home who hasn't heard of it?
Yes. So brain spotting, if you notice, if I'm talking or you're talking to someone, they might notice they're looking up, they're looking down. When you're looking there, someone's actually processing as they're looking at certain spots. And so brain spotting helps to unlock these trauma memories where they're stored in your body so that way you can release them. So I'll just give an example. A client came to me really anxious about her business. She had low sales. She was really worried. So we first identified what sensations are you noticing in your body as you're witnessing this anxiety come up. I'm noticing so much pressure in my chest. I'm noticing tension in my shoulders and a pit in my stomach. Okay, so what I have them do is I have them look around the room and find a spot that amplifies these sensations. So when you're looking at a specific spot, it can trigger certain areas of the brain where the trauma was stored. So as they're looking here, they're noticing, oh, I feel it more here. And then they start to notice memories are coming up, more sensations are coming up, a memory that's connected to the anxiety. For example, my client in this circumstance, her mom would leave her every single time she would make a mistake. She would leave the room, she would punish her. So she had so much anxiety that she was having low sales and was doing something wrong in quotations because it was activating this fear of abandonment when she was 5 years old and her mom would just leave the room if she would make a mistake. How could you not feel anxious? After that, she was able to feel much more regulated when she was in lower seasons of her business. And she was able to actually process these things. She was bawling her eyes out and she was really processing all of this, releasing this out of the body. She could never consciously say that. She didn't know that that was at the core of like, oh, why I'm so anxious. But when we're having a big emotional response to something, it's not coming from our true adult self. Our true adult self feels capable, like we can handle any challenges. What happens is when we have something that's quote unquote too big for the circumstance that we're in, it's coming from our a younger version of ourselves who it's reminding us of something similar.
Yeah. I love this. Oh my gosh. I've heard of similar processes. I've never heard of it being called brain spotting, but I love the way you do that. I have worked with different processes that are similar, but that was super, super cool. I wish we could keep
Thank
talking
you.
forever because I'm just loving this. I feel
Yes.
like I want to even go into the other two responses, but I know we're on time wise not as good. But but everybody, this has been amazing. So I hope you're all taking notes. So, if
Mhm.
someone did want to start regulating their nervous system, what are 3 tips that you can recommend that they could do just to start to regulate that nervous system down?
Yes, excellent question. So, 3 tips to really regulate your nervous system. A, start to become aware of what are the thoughts I'm thinking, what are the emotions I'm noticing. Because when we're working so much, when we're so busy, we are disconnecting from our body. We're not connected to our body, so we won't know what nervous system state we're in. So then we can't help ourselves regulate out of it. So that's step number one. Tip number two is when these negative stories or shame comes up, start to get space from it. Imagine, externalize it almost as you can see this negative thought like a person, a shape, color, or image. So you can get some space from it and not identify with it because not all of our thoughts are truth, okay? Not all of our thoughts are truth. We do not need to believe all of our thoughts. Our thoughts are coming from our nervous system state. And then 3 is learning how to process our emotions. And I teach you exactly how to do that in my freebie in on my Instagram that's completely free. When you can learn how to process your emotions, then you will stop getting as stuck. You won't get stuck in these nervous system states for as long. You'll be able to regulate out of it. So those would be my 3 top tips to regulate your nervous system as a female entrepreneur.
Oh, I literally love all of those. Thank you so much. And where can people find you?
Yes, so they can find me on Instagram at Heal with Val, HEAL with VAL on IG. And then I also have my own podcast where we dive even deeper into these topics on how to regulate your nervous system, heal your anxious attachment style, feel secure in dating, all of that amazingness, especially if you're a business owner and you want to look to also reduce your stress. I have a podcast called the Anxiety Recovery Podcast by Valerie Rubin. It's like free therapy every Thursday for an hour. So I would love for you to also check that out. Those are my top 2 spots, places where you can connect with me and find me. And then, yeah, we could always talk about those other 2 responses in another podcast if that felt aligned in the future.
Ah, Would love that. Because this has just been so good, and just even being able to go deep with you on all three of these processes. Because obviously, guys, I know that we have gotten through so much here now. Like, we could have done a whole thing just on nervous system, and a whole thing just on parts work, and a whole thing on just somatic practices. So, audience, you've done a great job in keeping up with such in-depth topics. I know that this interview will have been life-changing for so many people. So honestly, thank you for just going with it, Val. Like, it's just been so nice to chat and just, yeah, get this out there.
Yes, absolutely. Everyone needs to have access to this information. I'm so passionate about it. And thank you so much for having me on and letting me educate your audience to help them and serve them to regulate their nervous system as they're running their businesses as female entrepreneurs.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for being here, and we look forward to connecting with you again soon.
Yes, thank you so much. We'll talk soon.